Good morning, everyone. We are a couple minutes out from starting our task force meeting as other members are logging in currently. So please just bear with us and we'll get started shortly. Good morning, everyone. This is Michelle Reinen from the Department of Ag Trade and Consumer Protection, your facilitator for the Governor's Task Force on Student Debt, and it is now 10 o'clock. A reminder that this session is being recorded, and we will move to our welcome remarks and hand it over to Secretary Kathy Blumenfeld, the chair of our task force.
Great, thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone to meeting number 7. I have to admit, back in May 13th, when we launched our first meeting, I kind of an inkling of me thought that by late August or by early August, we might be able to meet in person, but obviously that is not the case. And so we are nearing the end, the home stretch of our task force. So first of all, I wanted to wish you all and hope that you all are in good health and your friends and families are as well. And thank you for being here. I know these 3-hour-long sessions are tough, especially when they're probably sandwiched in between other virtual meetings that you're doing as well. So I really just want to pause and say thank you for being here and being so engaged and being so present in your energy. It's been remarkable that we've been able to do so much in such little time. I see one comment from Shannon that she can't hear. Is anyone else having any difficulty hearing right now? If so, please chat in. And if not, maybe Cody, you can follow up privately with Shannon. Okay, Lucy can hear, so that's great. All right, so today the length of our meeting is just going to purely be dependent on the discussion, the subgroup recommendation discussions that we have. And I'm looking forward to healthy discussion. And I will turn it over to Michelle to start out. She'll go over the roll call and agenda, and then I will be back talking about process, and we'll jump right in. So thank you. And Michelle?
Thank you very much. So yes, we're jumping right in today. And so we are going to hear from the work groups. It is the report out day on the recommendations that they've identified. So after our roll call and an overview again of our process and where we've been and where we're going, we will hear from the secretary to report out on the government, public and private institution subsidies and financing solutions recommendations and have discussion on those. We'll take a break. And then we'll hear from Laura Sutherland, and she will be doing the report out for the consumer protection recommendations and follow with our discussion. And then we'll hear from, after another break, we'll hear from Executive Secretary Connie Hutchinson on the borrower education and management of higher education expenses recommendation and discussion. We'll cover those next steps in our next meeting and have our adjournment. So again, the meeting length will be entirely dependent upon the amount of discussion that we have after hearing about those recommendations. So with that said, we'll move directly into roll call. And again, if you can chat in that you're here, and I'll try and keep up in going through. So already heard from Secretary Blumenfeld that she is here. So Derek Campbell. Here, great. And Connie Hutchinson. Saw there, great. And Laura Sutherland. Here. And Kiana Jones. Thank you. And Larry Graves. Here. And Jeff Brent. I saw, thank you. Brandon Trujillo. Thank you. And Rebecca Larson. Great. Representative Ballwig. And Representative Hesselbein. Not seeing anything there yet. I know we always have a little digital delay, so check back in. And then Senator Smith. Great, thank you. And Shannon Halsey. Great. And I have a block, so sorry. Mashoud Akhtar. Thank you. Kiamani Alford. Great. Karen Bauer. Great. Shannon Conlon.
She texted, or she chatted.
Right.
She was here. Yep.
Sorry. Thank you. Let's see. Jody Chung. Great. And Lucy Fensel. And Renee Gash. Not hearing from Renee yet. We'll check back. Austin Hammond. And Marisha Harris. I'm here and might have to sign up early. That's great. Participate as long as you can. We appreciate that. Renee Howard Pez. Not seeing anything yet. Sylvie Eisen. Thank you. Derek Kindle, or in for Derek could be Shane Maloney. Shane, thank you. Paul Kundert. Thank you, and you'll also need to be leaving early. We appreciate that. Sherry Peplinski will be in your place. Kevin McShane. Thank you. Jamie Miller. Michael Madursky is unable to attend today, an unexpected conflict. Michael Rosen. And Alexandra Shade, I believe you signed in earlier. Thank you. And Casey Wachniak. All right, and I will circle back if Representative Hesselbein is here. Not hearing yet. As others join, we'll just be checking back in conversation. So with that, I will turn it back over to the Secretary.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Before we dive in, just wanted to give a little background recap where we've been. I know coming in every other week, it's good to probably just get regrounded. So the beginning of this, we set out with some success points. We call them success in action, and just want to revisit those so that we make sure we stay aligned in terms of our original ideas of what success would look like at the end of this task force. So really being able to examine student debt from many angles and many viewpoints. And I think we've accomplished that from listening to so many diverse people coming in and sharing their expertise with us, hearing from all task force members and seeking their input and ideas. We had, a great response of proposals coming in from task force members, and you all have been very active in the discussions, and that has been wonderful. Researching proposed solutions to address the issues outlined in the executive order. I think 37 different recommendations reflects very positively on that success point. Developing sound recommendations for how Wisconsin can tackle its student debt problem. I think, again, looking at the body of knowledge that we've created, which gets to our last success point, that we can share with Governor Evers and present to him and for others to use and to consider. I think we've done a really nice job in that. So kudos to all of you for your participation in this. Next off, go to the next slide. Just looking at our process again. So we are in meeting 7 of 8. So we'll have our final meeting next week. In this meeting, we're going to hear the facilitators of each of the work groups share the top solutions and draft recommendations that were identified in the work groups during meeting 6. And our goal today is really to finalize these draft recommendations for the final report. Our group will work really, really hard to turn around that final report. Our goal is to get that draft report in your hands by the end of day Friday. Much of it we've discussed and you've seen with the 37 recommendations and all the meeting materials, but trying to condense that into our final draft report. You will get that at the end of day Friday. And then instead of a 2-week gap, I just want to point out that our next meeting is actually next week, August 12th, to review the final recommendations and the final draft report. And at that meeting, we'll be sharing kind of the communication strategy and timing of when the report will go to the governor's office. So 2 meetings left, still a lot of work to do, but I think we're in a really good spot and looking forward to the discussion today. Next slide, please. So just by way of background and refreshing your memory, we have the 37 proposals here that were divided by work group that each work group took a look at and had airtime at least for all of the 37. Some of them, a few of them were in written report only that came in from external sources, but hopefully you had a chance to really focus on your work group activity recommendations, learn about them, talk about them. Several were grouped into different buckets so that we could talk about the what in terms of what we're going to recommend to the governor. So this slide you have seen before, but just wanted to refresh your memory on the great work that you all did. And the next slide really gets at kind of this next proposal. So you'll see at the top in the funnel, I'll say, there were 11 consumer protection recommendations, 12 borrower education, and 14 in the government and subsidies and financing. And so those kind of have winnowed down into 8 recommendations, and I'll talk about those 8 recommendations in just a minute. A couple of them we pulled out because we really felt that they were foundational in nature. So advocacy, disparate impact, and data collection really are foundational to all of the recommendations. So in the report, we're actually pulling those out in a separate section saying that there should be advocacy across the board. All of the recommendations should take into consideration disparate impact in vulnerable communities. And we need to improve our data collection in all aspects so that we have a better handle on what and how things are improving in the state, hopefully improving in the state of Wisconsin as we look at that. So all of those then will fold into the final report. And just by way of memory, that body of knowledge that we're creating, all 37 proposals will be included in the final report. So our appendix will include all of those. So every submission by every person on our task force will be forwarded on to the governor for consideration. We're just highlighting a few of those that made it kind of to the cream of the crop for consideration. If you go to the next slide, this was included in your handouts this morning. And if I put my accountant hat on, my CPA hat, one of the things you do when you're doing financial statements is you always do a bridge back from the current period to the last reporting period. And you make sure that you understand how you got from point A to point B. This is a similar exercise that we did. This is the same worksheet that you had as you went through your subgroup work. But you'll notice that we've got 8 recommendations here. And we'll talk about the 8 recommendations. And we wanted to take kind of a bird's eye view of the 8 recommendations and bridge them back to the key elements of Governor Evers' executive order that created this task force. And so you should be familiar with this format. This is really just a view of the 8 top recommendations that are moving forward. So in full transparency, because that is the way I like to operate, we had done this, and there were 2 top recommendations that came out of each of the 3 subgroups. And as we put them all 6 of those, 2 from each group on this page, we noted that the second column, which is a decrease in existing debt burden for borrowers, was very light. So there wasn't a ton. We had tax credits out of our work group. That was the one recommendation that really could provide some relief to those with existing debt. And when you stand back and you think about the problem in Wisconsin, we know that there is a huge, $20 to $30 billion of student debt that is held by Wisconsin residents. So in the spirit of the subgroup, we had 2 that we felt were honorable mentions, and that is loan forgiveness and refinancing, that our work group really spent a fair amount of time discussing. So we've added those 2 as honorable mention recommendations into the discussion for today to make sure that the governor has tools in his toolkit that not only help people on the front end with financial literacy and financial counseling, not only that help people during school, but really has tools in his toolkits to use to help those that have existing debt. And we heard from so many borrowers, both through our listening sessions prior to this and to our borrowers that shared their personal story, very personal stories with us during the task force. So you'll see ultimately there are 8 recommendations moving forward. And if you look down each column, I feel like we have covered essentially the charge that came out of our executive order. So I'll pause there to see if anyone has questions or comments on that. And Michelle, maybe you can look at the chat if anything comes in. If not, we can move to the next slide.
Yes, not seeing anything in the chat at this time.
Thank you. And I wanted to also give you a glimpse of how we are going to structure the final report so that you can have a sense. And I will say in the past 24 hours, we've moved a few things here and there, but this is where we've landed as of this morning. to the organization of how the report will look. So we'll start out with acknowledgments. So all of you will get acknowledged for the great work that you've done and contributions. We'll have an executive summary, which will try and in 2 pages or less, really kind of be a standalone document that will be a high-level version of what the recommendations are. We'll do some work on background in terms of, defining the student debt problem that we're tackling. We'll talk about those 3 foundational issues of advocacy, disparate impact, and data collection. And then we'll get into the summary recommendations, which we have and will be sharing and discussing in this meeting today, followed by a conclusion. And then in the appendix, we will have the actual executive order and the meeting schedule, our methodology and process, and then all 37 of the proposed solution summaries. So this is what we think the final report, that draft report that we will give you on Friday will look like from kind of the organizational standpoint. All right, with that, if you want to move forward to the next slide, we will dive into the government, our subgroup, and look at the 4 proposals, the 2 that came out and the 2 honorable mentions, and really just present at a very summarized level. You all have the draft summaries in your email. You got them on Friday, and then we sent them again on this morning along with the worksheet. And really just an opportunity to comment on them. I'll share a little overview of them, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And for each of the subgroups, we have about 45 minutes for discussion. In this subgroup, we have 4 to cover in those 45 minutes. In the others, there are 2 proposals. So if you kind of just think about that from a budgeting time frame, and Michelle and her expert facilitative skills will help us through that as well. So things could move faster or slower depending on the level of discussion within each of the subgroups. So with that, let's move to the first look at our work group. So again, we have 4 recommendations that we'll be discussing. One is the increased need-based and targeted aid for post-secondary education. The second is loan forgiveness. The third is refinancing. And the 4th is state student debt relief tax credits. And you'll see that we're just taking them in alphabetical order. So let's look at the first one, which is increased need-based and targeted aid for post-secondary education. And that really came in the form, I think we had 4 different proposals for this one. That kind of summarized up into these higher level recommendations. And really by bringing them up a bit, it gives the governor a little latitude in how he chooses to consider these, and gives him some flexibility. So one thing that we heard loud and clear, and really, again, is foundational, as well as I think was a part of every single presentation discussion, is really helping those people that need it the most. So that's where we find increased targeted aid and grants, really increasing aid to the Wisconsin grant. The Talent Incentive Grant is another great program. And we heard from Executive Secretary Connie Hutchinson early on that there's so much more need than there is funding available. And this already really is very targeted, and the infrastructure is there. It works well, but there just aren't enough dollars to really go around. And so that is the part 1 of the recommendation. The second part really talks about promise programs. We know that just like ice cream and having 31 flavors, there's a lot of different flavors of what a promise program looks like and is being implemented, anything from first dollar to last dollar. But the second piece of the recommendation is looking at how can we, as a state, kind of come together and implement a statewide promise program that would also really increase the early awareness of post-secondary opportunities in a way that would really help those that might not even think that they could go to college, really capture them early and help them get there and pay for college. So all in, by increasing need-based grant and looking at the viability of a statewide promise program, really get at the communities that we are trying to access and get more people in post-secondary education, those vulnerable communities, increase higher education attainment. We've talked a lot about completion and the importance of completion, and really making higher education attainable for everyone. So I'm going to pause there and just see those that submitted recommendations, questions, comments, concerns. We can open up the discussion. I think Michelle will facilitate it.
Yes, thank you. So if anyone has a comment that they'd like to chat in, or we will try using the raise your hand feature as well, and we can call on you that way. So please, if you have any additional comments or questions you'd like to contribute, feel free. All right, Masood, would you like to please go ahead?
Yeah, I have some general question as we move forward. One of them is, I think it would be good idea for each of these recommendations to say, how would we measure success if these recommendations are implemented? And number two is that how these recommendations are going to help reduce the existing debt and future, if any, something like that.
Secretary, were you able to get all of that? I know there was a little bit of feedback issue.
So success, defining success, maybe you can try that again. Defining success.
How do you measure success for each of these recommendations? And second one was, how do these recommendations address the existing debt and future debt?
Great. I think many of them have elements of that. One of the challenges with being specific at this point, and I'm all about goals and SMART goals, measurable, attainable, is the how. And because we're at a higher level, it is very difficult at this point because we've not really outlined the details of the how. We're more at the what. What tools can we put in the governor's hands in order to address student debt? Where I think the specific measurable goals will come as a outgrowth of the how. So I think we have covered in the summary recommendations a bit. We can definitely go back through each one of those to understand, emphasize, put punctuation around that. But I think at those specific measurable goals, that would be something that would come down the road in terms of the detailed recommendations and the how would be measured. But I do believe we can absolutely take a swath through each of the 8 recommendations to make sure that we've punctuated how does it address it as well. So really good feedback. Thank you, Masood.
Any other questions or contributions anyone would like to make on this recommendation? And you can just raise your hand in the participant box or go ahead and chat that in. Masood, your hand went back up if you have a follow-up.
Well, since no one was asking, I have another general recommendation at the end of this. When Kathy was talking about all the recommendations and how these recommendations are going to be presented to the governor's office, my experience is that under Doyle administration, when I was doing this for his Grow Wisconsin plan, we put together a PowerPoint presentation, and actually instead of just sending it back to his staff, we requested an hour face-to-face meeting at that time, which now can be done by Zoom, where his key staff people are there, the governor is there. We can describe very, the process that we use and how we collected this information, give the opportunity the governor and staff to ask any question we might have. And it was very productive. We were there for about 1.5 hours, and governor asked a lot of questions, and the committee members were able to answer. So just a suggestion as you move forward, give some parts to that approach.
Thank you, Mr. for that contribution and that idea as to how best to present this in the recommendations to the governor's office. I believe that's also going to be part of the meeting number 8 when the draft final report is reviewed. But Secretary, if you'd like to add anything more to that?
Agree. We'll be sharing those details, and we're working with the governor's office on a communication plan as we speak. So we'll have those details, but great suggestion, great feedback. Thank you, Masood.
And in the chat, I'm seeing a question from Representative Baldwin. I believe it's a question, please, on the statement for more favorable terms on first dollar or promise program.
This is Representative Baldwin. So I just don't understand what more favorable terms means in relationship to a promise program. The promise program we had in the past was sign up and a little bit of seed money for those students that went into higher education, but that and making them more aware of their eligibility for the Wisconsin grant. But I don't know what kind of favorable terms you're suggesting.
Michael Rosen, I think that might have come out of yours. Do you want to comment on that?
There you go. Hi. Yeah, around the country, Kentucky has one, for example. New York has a model. A number of states have established, Connecticut, Maryland, have established statewide promise programs. And what they do is they guarantee the tuition, generally the tuition for students based on various criteria. In the state, we have a number of UW-Madison has the Bucky Promise, MATC has a promise program, and in most of the in those cases, they're what we call last dollar promise programs, where the colleges provide funding after the students have used up their Pell Grants and Wisconsin state grants, etc. But in some places, states are discussing having a first dollar program, which means that the state would cover the tuition so that the students would then have money for books, housing, transportation, etc. Because what we found with some of the promise programs that are last dollar promise programs is that tuition is a minor cost of the attendance of college for most students. So even when they cover tuition at a school like MATC, which is the one I'm most familiar with, many of the students can't afford the books, they can't afford transportation, and so a first dollar program would be more effective in addressing the real overall cost of college. But there are a whole variety. There's also a middle dollar program, which essentially provides a stipend above and beyond tuition. That's the simplest way to put it. So there are three different varieties, but we felt that one of the most effective ways of avoiding student debt was avoiding it before students accrue it, and that promise programs have proven effective, as I said, in various states, Kentucky, Tennessee, and elsewhere, in helping to accomplish that.
Thank you, Michael. And just a comment as well and a reminder to the task force from Connie Hutchinson that we also have the nonprofit schools as part of this task force, and the Higher Education AIDS Board works closely with them as well. So again, just a reminder to include our nonprofit schools in any solution is being voiced there. Is there anything additional you'd like to add, Secretary, with this recommendation in response to that extra voice and clarification there?
No, that was really helpful, Michael. Thank you. And it might be just that the words there can be tightened up a little bit in terms of more favorable terms. Might be leading a little bit of confusion. Good. Anything else on this particular recommendation? If not, let's move to the next one.
I just want to check, Masood, I see your hand is raised, but I'm not sure if it's left over or if you have any additional comment on this one. Don't, we're going to move on. Thank you.
Okay, great. And this was one of our honorable mentions. Again, we heard a lot about, debt holders that have $5,000 or less, that were coming from vulnerable communities, that were, having a hard time getting back into school. We also heard about some successful programs that were very targeted, that are kind of a win-win for Wisconsin, where if we need teachers, for example, or veterinarians or different professions, especially in our rural communities where it's very hard to sometimes attract different professions, that a tool in the toolkit might be very targeted loan forgiveness. And so we already have some programs in Wisconsin like this that are administered by the Higher Education AIDS Board, like the Wisconsin Teacher Education Program and Wisconsin Health Professions Loan Assistance Program. So offering up in the spirit of our work groups discussion, this and refinancing were very high vote getters. But looking at, again, ways to address our more vulnerable communities and provide a win-win for Wisconsin with very targeted programs. So with that, I'll open up the discussion.
Again, just looking for the raise of hands or comments in the chat. Not seeing any questions from the group on this one or any additional comments.
Okay, then let's move on to the next one, if you would, which is refinancing. Again, the second honorable mention idea. And I think thinking back to the genesis of this, I think this is where it all began. And the group had a really, really good discussion around refinancing. And of all the 37 proposals, I think this is probably the heaviest, one of the heaviest lifts, and involves probably the biggest startup cost potentially if we created a statewide refinancing authority. And some of the discussion around it, we know that, high interest rates have been problematic for borrowers. And we heard from Rhode Island Treasurer Seth Magaziner about the long-standing refinancing authority that they've had in Rhode Island. And there was a few different, I think, again, we had like 4 recommendations looking at refinancing. And one of the things during our discussion at our subgroup that we talked a lot about was the fact that many of the existing state refinancing authorities are helping those refinance that are already able to refinance because of their good credit. And so the people that were really trying to help, so they could do that today. Like today, a person with good credit in Wisconsin that had high debt could actually go to Rhode Island and use their authority and refinance their debt. We also know, though, that once you refinance federal student debt, you lose many of the protections that come along with federal student debt, like forbearance, forgiveness, the income-driven repayment plans. And unless the state is able to kind of replicate some of those, even though a borrower might get a lower interest rate, all in, it might or might not be the best solution for the borrower. And so kudos to the group, because there was good discussion and good creativity of how could we help those that can't refinance today, and how could we create a solution that would help provide access to those with less than stellar credit and be able to refinance as well. And kudos again to Paul Kundert, who really came forward with a innovative and creative way that the state could partner with those that are already doing refinancing to subsidize kind of the risk involved with those with lower credit. So the group felt that this would be a viable exploration item for exploration to see how we might be able to offer solutions for those with less than better credit without potentially having to go through, the huge start and infrastructure build with a refinancing authority. So I think the group felt it was definitely worth further look at this, and to look at ways, in creative ways, that we could maybe do something unique in Wisconsin, a little bit different than other state authorities. And the other kind of side of this discussion is at the federal level. So right now we know that federal loans are not refinanceable the way like a mortgage is refinanceable. And there are active bills in Congress today to allow for student debt refinancing. So that's the other thing, is this could also be, and this ties to our advocacy kind of foundational item, that we also can continue to advocate at the federal level for a refinancing solution, because that would obviously alleviate a lot of the higher interest rate issues that are in place today. So with that, I will pause. And Michelle, I see some comments have come in.
Yeah, some comments have come in, and just a reminder, if you'd like to make one, please just use that raising the hand in the participant box or the chat box. But from Connie Hutchinson, the question is, since the treasurer's office in Rhode Island is doing this, could we possibly have look into having our state treasurer, Godlewski, be given this authority?
Yeah, I think that wherever, if the governor chooses to pick up on this and create a refinancing authority, he can choose where that refinancing exists. Absolutely.
And then another comment from Kevin McShane is the presentation we heard stated the issue with refinancing those with credit scores under 650 is that you could not get the bond rating needed to run such a program. Can you comment on how that would be resolved?
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment, and then Paul, I believe you're still here till 11, so perhaps it would be great to hear directly from you. But I think one idea would be, instead of creating the state-run authority, would be taking all those startup costs and investment costs and using them instead potentially as subsidizing the risk that existing financial institutions who are doing student debt refinancing as an incentive for them to go lower in the risk profile of the borrower. So Paul, are you still on?
Yes, and I had wanted to make a comment anyway, so I appreciate being called on. I thought we had a very good conversation in our subgroup, and I actually wanted to compliment you and your team on the summary of it, which I thought was very accurate to the conversation as I remember it. But just to add emphasis to what you're saying, what we found in looking at this issue in our subgroup is that when it comes to borrowers that have really strong credit, they already can access rates consistent with the state authorities through private lenders in Wisconsin. The most challenged debt, which I think has already been raised in the previous discussion, is it's often lower balances and people that don't have the credit profiles that would let them access either a private lender or any of the state authorities, because the bonding, as you said, reflects the risk pools of the borrowers. And so what we were identifying is that group that's really without a solution and actually does need it the most are those who have both a low balance and are struggling in credit to begin with. So we wanted to find a way to partner with possibly private lenders to incentivize them to lower the interest rates for those below what their credit profile would in the private sector deliver for a rate. Because those are the folks that need the rate relief the most, and there isn't a solution, either public or private, that we identified that would help them.
Thank you, Paul, for that clarification and additional information. So also of note is Jeff Brandt would like to likes the idea of having the ombudsman in the treasurer's office as well. And then Kevin McShane also agrees with the comments that I would want to be sure those that need it most could use the program. And it seems your proposal is addressing how to do so. And so thanks for that. And Mashoud, I see that your hand is raised if you'd like to comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. In our state, we have WHEDA, Wisconsin Housing Economic Authority, and they have the authority actually to give some guarantee for certain types of projects in the state. And what it does literally in some cases lower the interest rate, but it is guaranteed by 50% or 60% by WHEDA to lending institutions. And if these people who have a lower credit score and lower balances, obviously will have two problems. One, they're not going to get it. So if the state can give this guarantee, or WHEDA authority can be extended to include the student loan, but then we need to work with these students to make sure they do graduate. Otherwise, there's a big risk for the state. Then we need to add maybe more mentoring and working with these students in that category to increase their graduation rate. So maybe something to think about.
Thank you for that that idea and exactly that last portion, and really considering how to make sure that these students are able to graduate if we're able to get that guarantee there and that lower rate. Secretary, anything additional?
No, I think those are all good comments, and I think those would be important elements as you structure a program around what refinancing looks. And for me, I love the links between the different proposals. So thinking about, we'll be talking about an ombudsman in just a little bit, and kind of the link to how these programs would get overseen and developed and executed and measured, thinking about how these all could fit within a office of the ombudsman. It makes sense to me. One of the things today that is so unique in Wisconsin is just how divided up all the agencies are with their respect to oversight of student debt. I mean, everything from DFI to DSPS with educational, the for-profit schools, consumer protection in DATCAP, veteran affairs in the Department of Veterans. I know I'm missing DPI has a bit of insight into this. So there are just so many, even DOR, there are so many different, and of course, the Higher Education AIDS Board. So there are so many different state agencies that it seems to make sense that if there is like a center that all of these things can feed into through an ombudsman, it seems to make a lot of sense, as well as the treasurer's office as well, in terms of kind of being our state's CFO and financial watchdog. All right, anything else related to refinancing?
Not seeing any hands or additional comments.
And let's move to the fourth and final of our subgroup, which was state student debt relief tax credit. And the discussion around this really came in two different forms. One is tax credits for borrowers themselves, and there are a lot of states that are doing this. And the other is state tax credits for employers to incentivize them to help their employees with student debt. So let's start with state tax credits for borrowers. And the discussion around that was really around the lift. While it will take legislative approval, tax credits is something that the state is familiar with. We know how to do it. There are many states that are doing this right now, offering tax credits for those borrowers that are paying on their student debts. Maryland has a little bit of a new nuance to theirs, where they look at debt to equity ratios, trying to get at a little bit more of vulnerable populations, and looking at creative ways. And I think the essence of our recommendation is state tax credits can be pretty straightforward, but we'd also like to put punctuation around trying to be creative in looking at debt to income ratios, working in high demand fields, and those that have attended college in state. It's also an attractive way to keep people in the state after college. Excuse me. And then the second, we heard from two organizations, CUNY Mutual with their partnership in Vault, as well as Savvy, that have kind of platforms to help employers, help employees both manage their student debt, and then the ability, based on the IRS Abbott Labs private letter ruling, to incentivize them for helping match payments or make payments on behalf of their employees to pay down their student debt. Both the tax credits for borrowers and tax credits for employers seemed like a viable, doable, bipartisan, potentially way in which we could offer some quicker relief to the the borrowers of Wisconsin today, while hopefully addressing some that are in vulnerable communities, and also try and create that win-win for Wisconsin, where we try and target things to high demand fields and try and retain talent in our state. So with that, I will open it up for comment.
Great, thank you. Again, we'll just a reminder to use that chat box if you'd like, or just raise your hand in the participant and we can lend voice. Not seeing anything at this time. If anyone, here we go, Masood. You'd like to go ahead, Masood?
Yeah, we need to be a little bit careful with our recommendation because I always think about how divided our government is. So when you use all the time these words like low and medium income student with target, I'm not sure whether you will get a bipartisan support. So just a comment that we need to be careful about our wordings to get the support of legislator. If it fits into that heavy category, that will require some legislative support for the governor. So just a comment.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And anyone else have anything to contribute? Representative Ballweg, would you like to lend voice to this or?
Sure. So my concern is a tax credit for a borrower that might be in a very low tax bracket or have no tax liability really wouldn't be much of an advantage for that individual. Whereas possibly an incentive for an employer where they have additional buy-in where that benefit to the borrower might actually be able to go through some kind of a program you talked about with Vault or Savi, or be able to make some type of I don't know, extra support for them, and that would also tie them in possibly to to that employer to keep them in Wisconsin.
Great comments, and that's exactly the discussion that we had as well. And when we took that worksheet, going back to that bridge from the executive order to kind of our final recommendations, we did feel like that that's why we put the honorable mentions in, because that was true to our discussion, but that not every solution had to cover all of the to solve every problem. This could solve a problem for a certain group of people, but on the whole, we wanted to make sure that we had, again, multiple tools in the toolkit to be able to solve the different types of borrowers that have debt today. And this is one that clearly gets at those that have debt today. And again, on the tax credit for borrowers, that's where we struggled a little bit as we examined other states. And Maryland was the closest to kind of using, instead of like a direct credit for debt payments, because we know that a lot of people are in income-driven repayments. Looking at debt to income ratios as a way to provide a credit might be another vehicle to expand the reach of state tax credits for borrowers. So good comments, thank you.
And Paul Kundert, I see one last comment. I know you need to leave very soon. Would you like to lend voice to that before you need to go?
Sure. We didn't spend the time we didn't have the time in our subgroup to really dig in too deeply on the types of tax credits, but the comment from the representative makes me think maybe we should clarify that it could be refundable tax credits as well as non. In other words, the very modest income person that has heavy student loan interest debt perhaps could actually get a refund of more tax than they paid due to their income level. Again, that would have to be further explored, and we didn't get to that level of discussion in our group.
Great. Thank you, Paul, for that additional thought there. And Masood, would you like to go ahead?
I know there are some companies who are willing to take on the entire debt for these students under some kind of 4 to 5 year contract with that employees, but those people or students are not properly trained. And I'm just wondering if for those categories of employees, is there a way to provide very specific training to the state in exchange for those employees who are willing to pay the entire debt in exchange for that? So just a thought.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Just so everyone's aware, Alex will be back, but she needed to step away for a conflicting meeting. So everyone's just aware of the voices available. And Secretary, is there anything additional you'd like to add before we go to break? Because I'm seeing no additional hand raises or comments here.
No, just thank you for especially to the subgroup and all that submitted proposals that landed in our working group. We really appreciate it. I think we've got relief both on in terms of the front end and the back end. We really focused on front and back end in our group. And I think we have a group of solutions, again, tools in the toolkit that the governor could use to both provide relief on front and back end. So just want to say thank you. And Michelle, I think our next piece was to go to break, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, and I was talking to myself on mute. So. Thank you.
We've all done that.
So we are moving to break. We'll have a 10-minute break today, a nice long one to stretch your legs since we're having these deep discussions. And when we come back, we will begin with the consumer protection draft recommendations. Thank you. A 1-minute warning. We'll begin the meeting again in 1 minute. Welcome back from our break, everyone. We'll now proceed with the meeting and hear from Laura Sutherland as it relates to the consumer protection draft recommendations. Laura?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I'm wearing a mask, as you can see, and I also have headphones in. So how does that sound? I'm getting the thumbs up from Kathy. Great. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me. So again, I'm Laura Sutherland, and I am the representative of the Consumer Protection subgroup. It was a really terrific group of people. We worked well together and had a lot of symmetry in terms of the proposals that were in front of us and what we tried to tackle. We had about 11 proposals, and fortunately for us, because of that symmetry, we were able to distill those proposals into 2 and really capture the ideas in all of those proposals, so that we're going to be presenting to you here today. We can go to the next slide and where I lay out these proposals. So the first of the 2 is the Borrower Bill of Rights and the creation of a student loan ombudsman. We heard a little bit about that already from Secretary Blumenfeld. And then the second proposal is enhanced proprietary school regulations and the reinstatement of the Wisconsin Educational Approval Board. So we'll dive right in to the first one, the creation of the Borrower Bill of Rights. Let me first say we reference some work of one of our participants, Karen Bauer, in the presentation, in the proposal, and I misstated her place of employment. It's Legal Aid Society of Milwaukee. So I want to point that out, and we'll fix that straight away for the report. But the Borrower Bill of Rights originated out of, really, as I say, a number of the proposals that were provided to the group. There was a general theme that we needed some form of student borrower advocate, to help navigate the system of loan repayments and help counteract some of the misinformation, deceptive conduct, and just lack of linear information that is needed for borrowers. We heard from both expert presentations and student stories about how students face challenges just understanding the navigation of these repayment programs and the need for an unbiased entity that would help them understand the entire process, the complexities of borrowing and the complexities of repayment. That was a general theme that our group heard from many of our proposals and what we tried to address in the creation of the Borrower Bill of Rights and the Student Loan Ombudsman. As we know from our expert presentations, many states have introduced these Borrower Bill of Rights to address some of the serial issues that we often hear reported in the student loan servicing industry. Some of those issues that were highlighted by Seth Rothman from the Student Borrower Protection Center include issues having to do with, sorry, I'm pulling up his presentation here. forcing borrowers to make payments on loans already discharged in bankruptcy, refusing to comply with document requests from state agencies, consumer protection violations relating to the PSLF program, including failure to credit qualifying payments, and a number of other issues that we heard reported on from Mr. Frockman. We also heard issues similar to this reported on by Karen Bauer, as she represents many student borrowers who face issues with student lenders. So our recommendation is built on some of the model borrower Bill of Rights that we heard presented on by Jack Porter earlier in the session. And the intention of the Borrower Bill of Rights is to create a standard right for students, a licensing requirement of the servicer, and the ability to oversee and enforce these Bill of Rights. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. I received a telephone call. Didn't everybody hear that? It went through my phone. I apologize for that. That's what we get for the technological age. Everything is talking to one another. So sorry about that. So with respect to the Borrower Bill of Rights, the intention is to create, as I say, a list of rights that would have, well, the intention has three important components: that the loan servicers would be licensed through a state licensing authority, the establishment of licensing requirements that set standards of practice, and the creation of regular reporting requirements of student loan data. And this issue, the student loan data reporting requirements, also gets at some of the other issues that we've talked about throughout the task force, and that is the lack of data on student borrowers, and in particular, the lack of data on the impacts of communities of color and women and veterans and other vulnerable communities. So this data component we see as a really important component of the Borrower Bill of Rights. In addition to this Borrower Bill of Rights, it would be accompanied by an ombudsman. And again, as I say, Secretary Blumenfeld talked about the need for an ombudsman, or the interest in an ombudsman to sort of bring together all of the state's activities in the student borrower space. And our group spent a fair amount of time talking about that issue. In particular, this notion that there are a fair amount of resources out there right now, and it's going to be incumbent on any sort of resolution out of this group and ideally out of the administration, that we not just add an extra tool to the many tools, but we do so in a way that simplifies the process. And that tool, that an ombudsman, we believe, would be an added benefit in that regard and would facilitate that simplification. In other words, there are places in which consumers and student borrowers can get information, but it's not an aggregate place, and it is also often incomplete. So an ombudsman can be sort of a clearinghouse for that kind of information that student borrowers are so desperately need. So the ombudsman would be, the purpose of the ombudsman would be to enforce the Student Borrower Bill of Rights in part, but also to act as a conduit of solid and accurate and neutral information on student borrowing. So you all did receive in your materials, we did receive a comment about the Student Borrower Bill of Rights from Masood Akhtar, and he raised the concern that that this would be an additional oversight mechanism that's not necessarily needed and isn't borne out by the data that's out there. And of course, Masood, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm characterizing the letter that we received, and we appreciate the feedback. And I'm opening it up for the group to comment both on the proposal of the group, but also taking into consideration the thoughtful feedback that we received from Masood about questioning whether having an additional regulatory scheme with licensing and an ombudsman is necessary based on the data that's out there. And so, as I say, Masood, if you'd like to respond or further embellish on that, please feel free to do so. But I think I'll leave it there. If anybody has any questions or comments on this presentation or this recommendation, I'd be happy to try to field them. And of course, anybody in the group, if you'd like to also enhance what I've said, I welcome your input as well.
Thank you, Laura. So again, we'll continue to use the chat box and the hand raising feature in the participant list. And there was a comment while you were providing the readout in the information. So Connie Hutchinson, again, indicated that she likes the idea. I'm in financial aid. And my brother sent me a voice message he received about a great loan opportunity for his son who is at UW Stevens Point. He asked if it was legit, and she was able to figure out that it was a predatory lender, but wants to make the comment as well. But the staff there where she's at is just not equipped to do that on a statewide basis. So there's that piece. And then not seeing any hands raised, we'll continue with the comments. Representative Baldwin, if you'd like to chime in and expand on this, but are any other states doing the licensure of lenders or reciprocity/compact group doing this kind of review as SARA does vetting? The SARA capital SARA does that vetting there. Laura, if you want to respond to that, if you're able, or anyone from the group, and then of course Representative Baldwin, if you wanted to expand on that.
Yes, Representative Baldwin. So we had a presentation, as you may recall, from the National Governors Association by Jack Porter, and he provided a chart which was super helpful, listing all of the other states that have a borrower bill of rights and do in fact do licensing. So Connecticut, Colorado, Maine, and New Jersey have a licensing requirement. I think that was your question. And 10 states do have loan servicers who, I'm sorry. Yeah, so those are the states that have the licensing requirement, as I understand it right now.
This is Representative Baldwin. Thanks for reminding me about that. So my thought was that if there are a lot of states doing that, that would be a good opportunity to do some kind of multi-state compact so that individual states wouldn't have to do that, all of the background work in vetting those folks, and there'd be a lot more continuity, I think, in being able to catch them. And another question, with the work that you do at DATCAP and maybe that Shannon does at DOJ, are there some things that you can or can't do that would be enhanced by this additional office?
So I'll take this, and Shannon, you can chime in as well. I think that the answer is yes. I mean, there would be regulatory standards that would be directed at an industry that would take into account the type of work they're doing and the kind of conduct that we're trying to curb. So anytime you have more of a strategic approach to those things, that would be useful. And it also has a reporting requirement to the ombudsman. So that allows the state to understand what's happening on the aggregate and also get at it before anything critical happens. So in other words, DATCAP and the Attorney General's office is in some ways a reactionary mechanism. We're often very complaint driven, and we having an entity and standards set in place can allow us to be more preventative and more proactive and address concerns at the front end. Shannon, do you have any other thoughts on that? I know she had some technical.
Yeah, I believe Shannon was having some technical problems, so I'll watch for a comment there if one comes in. But I'll just, for now, while we're waiting to see if she wants to enhance what you stated there or expand on that. Connie Hutchinson did expand on the previous predatory comment in that funding to just also remind us that so many veterans are targets for predatory lenders in for-profit schools that can close. And then a response to that is that truth of what she's saying from Sylvie, saying we've seen students contact our office with the same regards, and it was ultimately predatory scams targeting students about offering loans, among other false promises there. So just some additional on that predatory lending and offerings and things there. And with that, Shannon has been able to make a comment, and she'd just like to say as to what regulations could be implemented, it would depend on the specific regulation that we are considering, and that she echoes everything that Laura has said at this point in regards to that. So.
I will add in terms of the licensing component, Illinois, a neighboring state, has a licensing requirement too. Actually, there's a number of other states that have loan servicing laws and requirements. And I think the idea of having a pact, at least perhaps one that's regional, would be a useful lift. But I will say that there are model laws out there in terms of what the licensure would require and some of the Borrower Bill of Rights, so that the state could look to for guidance. Did anybody else in the group have any thoughts on this or have any comments on Masood's feedback of our proposal?
Yeah, thanks for that, Laura. I'm not seeing any hand raises at this point. No one's chiming in, and there are no additional comments in the chat box. So I don't know if you had any final comments on this recommendation before we move to the other.
I will take, since we have a little bit of time, I will take a minute to look at the directives from the executive order of the governor and talk just briefly about how the Borrower Bill of Rights really addresses many of them. There was a directive that we look for solutions that decrease the existing debt burden of borrowers. We heard repeatedly about students being put in forbearance where they didn't want to be or shouldn't have been, or put in a consolidation, or just driven to do the wrong thing with their loan. So that would obviously have a significant impact on the types of the existing debt burdens. There was a request that we think about the racial and vulnerable population gaps for student debt. So of course, getting the accurate data for veterans and individuals of color and women in these repayment plans would be an effective way to address that concern and look at some of the predatory practices that are targeted often at those vulnerable groups. Clearly, it would increase the ease of student loan management. I think that's the predominant role of the BBOR and the ombudsman, and it would improve by the economic outcomes of those post-graduation if they have a lower debt burden. I think that in terms of the lift, this is going to, it is going to ask, it may ask for extra resources, as an ombudsman would be an FTE. And so there is some issue there in terms of the resources that we would need to stand up a program like this. So it could be a medium lift for implementation. And if there's no other comments, I'm happy to talk about the next proposal.
And again, still not seeing any hand raises or additional comments. Oh, here we go. Sherry Poplinski, would you like to go ahead? If you want to unmute your microphone and go ahead with your question.
Sorry, yes, I thought I did. Thank you. Thanks for the time. Just a follow-up question and thought regarding the licensure aspect of it. One, in reading the letter that was provided to it, it made me think about it a bit, is when we talk about student loan servicers, there are some that service only federal loans, there are some that service only private loans, and there are several that service a combination of the both. So when we're talking about potential regulations or Bill of Rights, I think it's really important to consider what the end goal is, and are we attempting to address federal loan issues, private loan issues, both. There's clearly some overlap, but from a regulation standpoint, there are some clear differences as well. And as far as the other states that have the licensures, they're not all consistent with the process and what they require, which creates a lot of difficulties for those servicers and lenders that are trying to adhere and keep track of every state's the requirements being a little bit different too. So just some food for thought as you continue to go down that path, and things to consider.
Thank you for that, Sherry, and I appreciate you being able to sit in for Paul Kunder in his needing to leave the meeting early today. Laura, would you like to comment on that?
I was going to, yes, I did want to respond. Thank you, Sherry. I think that's great feedback. I know that we had a presentation from the ombudsman from Illinois who raised some of the legal challenges to these borrower bill of rights on preemption grounds, and some of those are grounded in the idea of regulating certainly federal servicers of federal loans and incongruous standards. I know the DC Circuit addressed one of those issues when the servicing guidelines were inconsistent with the federal servicing guidelines. So certainly any standard would have to take into consideration conflicting regulatory frameworks that we couldn't expect a servicer to adhere to, and then taking into consideration their servicing of both private and federal loans. So a point well taken, and I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you, Laura. Anything additional before we move forward? All right, not seeing anything. Laura, if you'd like to proceed. The next one.
Okay, great. So this proposal, the enhanced proprietary school regulations and the reinstatement of the Educational Approval Board. Here again, we heard from a number of experts in the field that spoke at length about the impact deceptive and predatory practices are having on of some proprietary schools can have on student borrowers and students, and in particular how these practices have a particular disparate impact on communities of color, borrowers of color, women, and veterans. One in particular is the deployment of the 90-10 rule that I think we're all familiar with, whereby proprietary schools are not permitted to use or capped at 90% of federal aid as a resource, and that 10% needs to come from elsewhere. That 10% can come from the GI Bill. And so some of these deceptive practices from some of these schools are targeted at veterans, and that is obviously problematic. So enhanced proprietary school regulations to deal with some of these issues that we heard about from the experts who presented to the task force. As people probably recall, Wisconsin originally had what was called the Wisconsin Educational Approval Board. That board has now been recharacterized and changed somewhat and put into dispus, and is now called the Educational Approval Program. It doesn't have the same resources and that the EAB had its predecessor. In addition, the federal government has significantly relaxed its regulation and oversight of these schools. And with COVID, you're seeing an uptick in an intensity of their outreach. So all of this is sort of the backdrop for our recommendation that the regulations for these proprietary schools are heightened, and that we reinstate the Wisconsin Educational Approval Board, which was a recommendation of Representative Hesselbein. And we also leaned heavily on the proposal from Michael Rosen for this. So I encourage him to chime in if I don't cover everything. I will say, so the recommendation, as you can see, is the incorporation of best practices that were, or 4 best practices rather, that were part of a toolkit created by the organizations Veterans Education Success and the Century Foundation. And these policies are intended to heed the warning signs of troubling or failing schools, assure that funds are spent on education and not marketing, protect students' right to complain, ensure oversight of online college market, and provide consumers better data about these schools. What you often see is a fair amount of deceptive marketing, and as I said earlier, targeting communities of color, women, and veterans in particular. So incorporation of these best practices are intended to address those concerns and also allow for data collection on the activities of these schools and their outcomes, both so we can track that, but also so students looking at these schools have accurate and data that they can rely on in making their choice. One of the other issues that that formed the backdrop of this recommendation and is embedded in our recommendation is Wisconsin's participation in NC-SARA. We had a presentation on that early on. NC-SARA is the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements. That's a mouthful. I think that's why they went with the acronym. In any event, Wisconsin and 48 other states are members of NC-SARA, California being the only state that's not a member. And in our agreement to be part of this compact, we did offload much of our regular authority over a lot of the schools that are operating in our state. So the recommendation includes a more robust participation in NC-SARA so we can capture back some of the consumer protection regulations and oversight that we had predating our inclusion in NC-SARA. And to that end, the reinstatement of the Wisconsin Educational Approval Board. The Wisconsin Educational Approval Board was instrumental, some may know, in the oversight of proprietary schools prior to its changing. It continues to do so, but as I say, its reach is somewhat more limited. Many may have heard of the Everest or Corinthian, a school that went bankrupt and affected many Wisconsin students, and also was under investigation by the Department of Education and the CFPB and many other states. Wisconsin was one of the first states to be looking at that school, and Educational Approval Board's oversight and data collection of that school allowed us to move quickly. And the reality was we were less impacted by the closure of that school than most other states in the country. And that was because of the work of the previous EAB. So the reinstatement of EAB, resourcing the EAB in a way that it can be an effective tool for consumer protection against these schools. So I think that essentially gets at this recommendation. I'm happy to hear from Michael Rosen if he has any other thoughts or anyone else in our group about this proposal, and I'm happy to also field any questions about the proposal.
Thank you, Laura. And we do have a question right away from, or a comment from Rebecca Larson, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Laura, for this summary. I just had a question about best practice number 2 and the the additional oversight over NC-SARA. And maybe just for a little bit of background, you know, Wisconsin has a portal entity called the Distance Learning Authorization Board, which is made up of all sectors of higher education, including the Educational Approval Program that approves proprietary institutions for participation. And NC-SARA was formed as a way to comply with federal program integrity regulations. So it has a national, a regional, and a state footprint, and there's, you know, there's oversight through the national, the Midwest SARA, and through the Distance Learning Authorization Board. So I'm just, you know, and then maybe just a little bit more context in terms of participation in NC-SARA. I know this proposal is aimed at proprietary institutions, but just in Wisconsin, we only have one proprietary institution that participates through SARA, and then nationally, it's about 16% proprietary, 53% public, and about 30% private nonprofit. So I just wanted to make those comments, just that this has, you know, a much broader, there's much broader reasons why NC-SARA exists, and that, you know, in terms of this best practice number 2, what exactly is, did the subgroup intend by the additional oversight on NC-SARA?
Thank you, Rebecca. Would you mind expanding and spelling out the acronym of NC-SARA for the task force members?
Sure. Yep. It's the National Council of State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements. So it's a reciprocity agreement among states to allow students to take programs, educational programs across state lines. And then the intent is each state authorizes an institution to participate in NC-SARA. And then they've developed manuals, NC-SARA has developed manuals and different requirements for consumer protection, for complaint processes. They have, you know, there's a whole host of requirements that an institution must follow to be part of NC-SARA. It's just it's a hugely complicated policy that really was intended to comply with federal program integrity regulations.
Thank you for that on behalf of the task force members. Laura, would you like to follow on that clarification comment from Rebecca, or like me to proceed with the other questions?
Oh, I was just going to comment, and I welcome anyone else's comment. And also, this proposal, I think you're right, Rebecca, is a sector-blind proposal, so it applies, you know, not only to the proprietary schools, to other schools. And I think your comment on NC-SARA gets at that as well. The concept of becoming a more active member in NC-SARA is simply that we ceded a lot of our regulatory authority to NC-SARA, and as we understand it, and we have a limited understanding of this, so that's in part why it's a best practice and requires further discovery. But Massachusetts apparently has a memorandum of understanding, getting at their ability to have greater ability to enforce their consumer protection regulations. And so I understand that it has a reach beyond the proprietary schools. I think it's a recognition, the best practice is simply a recognition that we ceded a lot of our authority once we engaged in this compact and looking for a little bit more involvement in its deployment, so we continue to have the ability to regulate these schools. But I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
Yeah, so 2 other things that have come in. Well, you asked if Michael Rosen had anything, and he would like to add the accreditation to best practice number 3 is his comment there for addition earlier. And Representative Ballwig would also like to comment on this recommendation. So, Representative?
Thank you very much. I think Rebecca did a great job in kind of doing a further explanation of what the SARA program is we have, through our Midwest Higher Education Compact commissioners that work in this program, and then actually we're part of the folks that promoted it here in Wisconsin. And a lot of what the Educational Approval Board, the EAB board, then became unnecessary because we transitioned to the SARA program. So I think I reported out at the last meeting when we were in our subgroup that there was a question regarding the presentation regarding what was happening on the consumer perception side with NC SARA. And Dr. Waganke and I both talked about this with the higher education, Midwest Higher Education Compact. And it is, the consumer protections is based on what you do in your state. So I think one of the things that is both a positive and a concern when we hear from national speakers is they're taking quite a broad view when it comes to the concerns. And we do know that Wisconsin has, through DATCAP, very strong consumer protection provisions out there. So we think that this is a much lesser degree of problem for our students. Not that there are students that don't know how to get to help, but probably less of a problem than some of the others. But Dr. Waganke and I both talked about that we need to maintain, the strong sense that the SARA oversight has for these types of things. And then the other thing I wanted to mention when it comes to the Educational Approval Board, which kind of dovetails into this, things that the Educational Approval Board did in the past are no longer necessary because of our reciprocity with the being in the National SARA group. So I think reinstating the Educational Approval Board in any way would be very different than what it was originally. So I think we need to, and this is part of a recommendation, so I'm sure the governor would be talking with the folks at the at DISBIS of what they see that's different and what needs to go forward. So just wanted to add that piece to the conversation.
Thank you, Representative. Laura, did you want to comment?
No, I appreciate the feedback and the further input on the NC SARA oversight. That's useful to the group. Thank you for that, Representative Baldwin.
Thank you. And Rebecca Larson, I understand you'd like to comment further.
Yeah, just maybe to add one more comment. The NC SARA has added quite a few different protections for proprietary institutions in particular. And so that just might be something that the task force wants to look into. You know, there's been some practices where a for-profit would perhaps take a different name, go and establish in a different state, and have a branch campus. And so they've really added protections on the application process so that states are aware of what's happening with these proprietary institutions, also closely monitoring their financial responsibility scores and things like that. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation too, and that might be something that the task force wants to look into.
Thank you for that additional information and consideration. Are there any other thoughts or comments or questions from any task force members for this recommendation?
Michelle, I think Michael Rosen has his hand up, like literally.
Oh, thank you. Please, Michael, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate the work of the task force because this is an area that is of grave concern to me and many people in Milwaukee, because several of these proprietary schools established themselves during the Great Recession. And even though we had the EAB at the time, they recruited large numbers of generally very ill-prepared students, and students were left with really nothing but deeper in poverty, more debt, broken dreams, and used up financial aid. So I really appreciate, I just want to, compliment the subcommittee for its work. I did want to comment on a couple of the pieces, and I appreciate that they're in there. One is on the issue of spending money on marketing and recruitment as opposed to instruction. One of the measures that actually the United States Senate investigation identified as problematic with the schools was that with many of these schools, such as Corinthian and ITT, was that they spent much more money recruiting and marketing than they did actually on providing education. And so that's why I propose that, and I'm glad to see that that's in there. I did also add accreditation under in a comment on best practice 3, because one of the problems that students have who have attended these schools is that when the schools implode or they realize that they're too expensive, and they try to go back to another school, like one of our technical colleges or UW schools, they find out that the credits don't transfer. And that is because of they are nationally accredited. And so it's important that when we are providing information, students know what accreditation means and what it doesn't mean. I had a student in class one time who came to me and said she was considering transferring to going to Stanford Brown for a particular program. And I knew nothing about the school, but I looked it up and saw that it was nationally accredited. And I asked her if she knew what that meant. She said no. They told her it was a higher level of accreditation because it was national, when in fact what it meant was that it came from a different accrediting agency than the regional accrediting boards that accredit schools like UW-Madison, Marquette, MATC. And if she had gone there, if she hadn't finished and tried to transfer her credits, they wouldn't transfer. So I think it's important that that be added to the information in a way that students can understand it and not in the language just of people who are deep into education. But again, I want to thank the committee for its work. I think you did good work.
Thank you very much for that thoughtful comment. And Laura, anything additional from you on this recommendation or?
No, I think I'll simply say thanks for adding some more flesh on the bones about the marketing piece, Michael. I think that is clearly something that the task force and the subgroup was talking about in the creation of this recommendation. We did eliminate one of the best practices with respect to the 90-10 rule, as we see that as more of a federal issue and one that can be addressed in the overall federal advocacy about better implementation of the 90-10 rule, so it's not targeting vulnerable communities like veterans, for instance, but can get at that practice with respect to more robust regulatory scheme on the marketing, and then also data on their expenditures, so we can see, as you suggested, expenditures on marketing versus tutelage. So thanks for that recommendation.
Thank you, Laura. Not seeing any additional hand raises or chat box comments. So with that, we will move to our next break period. Again, it is another 10-minute break. And then when we come back, we'll hear from Executive Secretary Hutchinson on the Borrower Education and Management of Higher Education Expenses draft recommendations. And then following that, we'll have our next steps and meeting wrap up and adjournment. So if everyone could please meet back here at 12:04, take their 10 minutes and we'll reconvene at 12:04. Thank you. This is our 1-minute warning that will be coming back to our meeting in 1 minute. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a great break and were able to stretch your legs. We will now proceed and continue with our meeting. And here for the readout from Executive Secretary Hutchinson on the Borrower Education and Management of Higher Education Expenses draft recommendations. So I now turn the microphone over to you, Executive Secretary.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your help. So you're going to bring up my slides?
Yes, they should. There you go, is the first one.
All right. Can you open that up, the financial literacy education? First, before I start, I would like to say that big thank you to the staff at DFI who helped me with the drafts of these. It saved a lot of time, and I had some other things I was working on this week. So I really appreciate all that you have done for us on the task force, and especially for me helping get these done. So financial literacy education, we already have a program, a small program. Oh, by the way, I'm in my home by myself, so I'm not wearing a mask. So otherwise, because I noticed the other presenters were, but I don't think any of you can get it from me over the phone or over the computer. So we wanted to talk about expanding financial literacy in academic and career planning. And we do have some innovative things in Wisconsin now. Look forward to your future group that is at Department of Financial Institutions. I think does Cheryl Rapp run that program, Kathy? Yes, and does a great job with that. And additionally, they have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and a new kit that they've called Paying for College, which I have not looked through, but I'm sure it's wonderful. And also we talked about in our group the importance of having financial literacy, not just once you're in high school, but from kindergarten through 12th grade classrooms, because having the knowledge about what happens with finances, what happens when you take out loans, and also that information kind of would roll into, if you're talking about financial literacy and you're including college affordability in that and how to save for college, I think it would give students more of an idea that college is something that they can aspire to, even if that's not something that they've been thinking about. So we talked about the importance of that, and also promoting Wisconsin's College Savings Program, EdVest, so that more families could have access to that important resource. And I will say that I used EdVest for a nephew of mine, starting when my godson, when he was in kindergarten, I started putting money away for him, and he finished his freshman year and has enough in that, with not a lot of money that I put in every month, but he has enough to get through at least his junior year of college without any debt. So I think promoting that is a really important step. We also could build on the financial literacy standards that we have related to credit card debt when we talk about that with students, not just in high school, but earlier, and also continuing that education in college. We talked about a FAFSA awareness campaign, and we do have a program called College Goal Wisconsin, which I've been involved with since I became secretary and also when I was secretary for Governor Doyle. They hold FAFSA completion events around the state that are free at local high schools, and students can go in with all their information, bring their parents in, which is always a good idea, and fill out their FAFSA, and financial aid directors volunteer their time to go and help with those as well. And then collaboration with financial literacy and academic and career planning, which I think is important that we do that again with the Department of Public Instruction and with the Office of Financial Literacy. Those are important things. And then again, a student loan ombudsman, which would be, I think we talked about that some in the last group, that would be very helpful for students who are looking at what are the consequences of taking out a loan, what does it mean, helping them figure out whether or not they are good loans or predatory loans. So I think financial literacy education is pretty self-explanatory, but again, as I want to point out that our group talked about, this is important, not just starting when you're entering college, but from an early age on. So does anyone have any questions or comments about this? Does anyone on my group want to talk about this more?
Again, we'll continue to use the participant list hand raising, or go ahead and chat in your comments or questions that you have.
I'm glad because it's a pretty self-explanatory proposal that we have, so there might not be a lot of questions about this one. Does anybody, and like I said, does anyone that served on this group with me like to speak out about anything here?
All right, Representative Ballwig, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. So the chat pretty much says all of that, and I think it's through the DFI that there's an annual award for some of our local institutions, credit unions, and community banks that do go into our schools on financial literacy. So if we're talking about cooperating with different agencies, I think they probably should be aware and asked to talk about this in some of their presentations too.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And what's in the chat for anyone on the phone is that the financial literacy is also done by many of our credit unions and community banks, and we should be sure that they have this information on planning for higher education. And then Secretary Blumenfeld followed with a link for the newly released K through 12 financial literacy standards. That is dpi.wi.gov/finance/standards. So we will be sure to add that link to the Governor's Council on Financial Literacy as well in that information. So just to follow and summarize for anyone not seeing the chats there. Any additional comments or thoughts? Secretary Hutchinson, if you had a follow-up to Representative Ballwig, I'll sure give you that opportunity.
No, I really appreciate that information, Representative Ballwig. And I also want to mention that this is something that's preventative. So this is not really in terms of helping with students who currently have student loan debt. It's not going to help them. But hopefully this would be something that would be considered and could help those people who are going to be attending institutions of higher education in the future.
Right, and Senator Smith had also commented here, but if wants to lend voice, that like the recommendation includes all levels, it isn't enough to only introduce kids in high school. Did you want to add anything more, Senator Smith? All right, hearing nothing. There. All right. Not seeing any other comments or hand raises. Secretary Hutchinson, did you want to do any wrap up or proceed to the next recommendation?
I will say, having been an elementary school teacher and also having been a school principal and a school board member, I think that these are things that we don't really do at a young age, and I believe, as our committee does, that having this financial literacy early on would be an important step. And that's it.
Thank you. All right, I'll move to the next one.
Okay, enhanced loan counseling. And I think it's important, again, to talk to students when they are taking out loans about the impact that those loans have. Not all students, especially if they're getting private loans, don't always talk to the financial aid office. I know that the people in the financial aid offices already do this, and they do a very good job of it. So if we had some technology-based platforms that borrowers could use, the Savvy Solutions platform is really one that's after loans are taken, once you have loans and you're paying them back. But I believe that would be a really good program. And when I sent back my edits of loan counseling back to the staff at DFI, I forgot to add that it's important that if we are going to ask financial aid professionals to do this, they are going to need more resources because they are stretched thin. They do a wonderful job already. And if we want to enhance this, it should be, there should be some resources to go along with it. And this isn't something our committee talked about, but I have been thinking about this since we finalized our meetings, since I read through this and rewrote it and sent it back. I do want to mention that it might be a good idea to, even at the college level, require a first semester course that talks about financial literacy. And I don't know if you could do that at the tech schools or require it anywhere else, but I think that would be an interesting component to everybody's education and valuable. So that's all I have to say on that one. Do I get a prize for being the shortest?
We'll have to think of something. So
thank you.
A gold star or a virtual something. So
that's good.
Brandon Trujillo wanted to agree with any additional requirements, including support for resources. A comment there. Anything additional from this work group members that they'd like to contribute, or the task force as it relates to comments or questions?
While people are waiting to chat or write in, I will say that the conversations that we had during our work group were robust around these areas. So it could be that everybody already said what they needed to say, but we did have some very good discussion about these things. And I appreciate all of the comments and information that the people on my section of this group provided.
Thank you for that addition there. Again, not seeing anything from members as it relates to chat or hand raises in the box. If anyone is literally raising their hand, I only get a few camera views when displaying a PowerPoint. So please just go ahead and unmute your mic and comment so we don't miss that. All right. Well, not seeing anything with that, I'll leave it to you, Secretary Hutchinson, if you want to do any wrap-up remarks, and then we'll proceed with our agenda for the day.
I would just say that there have been some very, very interesting ideas presented today, and also a lot of very interesting discussions. So I think it's been a good meeting so far. And again, I appreciate the work of not just the people on my committee, but everybody else who has put time and effort into trying to find a solution for this problem.
Thank you very much for those words. And with that, moving forward with our agenda, will be the August 12th meeting, where we will look at that final draft report and really bring all the work, as Secretary Hutchison mentioned, together into this final paper here. So that meeting is August 12th, 10 to 1. It will be by WebEx. Again, if you have any comments that you'd like to submit, or any needs or information, please contact that Student Debt Task Force at dfi.wisconsin.gov email. And again, if you have any feedback related to the meetings or logistics, before we move into our final meeting, please reach out to me so we can make those enhancements as well and work out those logistics. And with that said, as it relates to the next step in that next and final meeting, I will turn the microphone back over to our chair, Secretary Blumenfeld of the Department of Financial Institutions.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you again for your excellent facilitation and keeping us on track. And thank you to Laura and Connie for your facilitation today. Great discussion, great ads. Again, as we prepared for this and researched the nation and looked at other task force report outs, I can say with confidence that I don't think any other report has been as comprehensive as the body of knowledge that we're going to set forth to the governor at the end of this task force, and that we did it in such an accelerated time. I mean, beginning to launch to conclusion is 3 months. So really nice job in terms of getting our arms around the situation, bringing in diverse speakers, hearing from all of you, and trying to assimilate a set of recommendations that we can deliver to the governor. So thank you for all of your work. And our goal will be to turn this around into a final report for your review by end of day Friday. That's our goal. I think we can get there. It's going to be a lot of hard work between now and then, but I'm confident we can get there. That'll give you enough time to review it prior to our final meeting on next Wednesday, sorry. And at that time, we'll entertain comments on the final report, as well as talk about communication plan going forward. And in our own virtual way, have a small celebration. So we'll give you instructions on that prior to the meeting. But in the meantime, happy reading, and thank you for your great efforts to date.
Secretary, before you officially adjourn, there is one process question that did post. If you're able to just review, I think, some of that process piece that's been highlighted as it relates to proceeding with the final report, and how each recommendation will be looked at as a whole as it relates to that polling, voting, and that work group piece.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are no hard and fast rules on how a task force moves forward. So given the fact that we had 32 people and 37 recommendations, really the heavy lifting was done in the work groups. So at this point, I am not planning to have a vote going forward on the report. The report is the recommendations of the subgroups that came forward and the comments thereupon. So my hope is that everybody can get behind the report as a whole. Some people may have some concerns with bits and pieces of it, but if we think of it as a toolkit moving forward, a set of recommendations, the governor can then pick that up, those 8 recommendations, along with the full body of knowledge, and determine, based on where we are in our world today and the unique characteristics of this budget process. Again, we tried to deliver these recommendations in time to be included in the next biennial budget process, that he can have a set of recommendations and determine kind of the next steps that he wants to move forward in his budget proposal. And then also the body of knowledge for others, whether it's legislators or private institutions, public institutions, can pick up and certainly try to implement some of the work that's in the body of knowledge as well. So that's the plan going forward. And this has been a very cohesive group of great discussions. And I'm not planning to necessarily have a formal vote to move forward.
Thank you for revisiting that.
Any other questions? Just trying to look.
I'm not seeing any in chat or any hand raises at this point.
Great. All right. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you all, I'll say with air quotes, next Wednesday. Until then, be well and have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.